The Pensions Minister says his new flat-rate pension will put an end to thousands of people claiming British state pensions who've never set foot in this country. Under existing laws, spouses of British taxpayers can claim a married person's allowance of up to £66 per week. And it's estimated by the government that around 200,000 people who claim it live abroad. The minister says he's going to put a stop to all new claims. But getting less attention was the fact the changes will also affect more than 1.5 million people in Britain. Our economics editor Faisal Islam reports.
So is the British pension system spraying money out across the rest of the world? You might get that impression from news today of moves by the government to crack down on the payouts of foreign spouses of British pensioners. Such payments will end with the pension reform plans announced in Wednesday's Queen's speech. But is that the whole story? Here's the way the system currently works. You build up an entitlement to the state pension by paying national insurance contributions, or NICs, during your working life. But there's also been a married person's allowance, where someone who hasn't got a full set of those contributions still inherits a portion of their spouse's pension. Right now, that normally means after a husband dies. This could be worth up to £3,500 a year. As the government points out, if someone moves abroad and gets married, then their spouse gets the rights for this pension for the rest of their lives. So as part of its new pension system, the government's decided to scrap this married person's allowance completely. From 2016 onwards, your pension entitlement depends on 35 years of your own individual contributions, not those of a husband or a wife. It can include, for example, caring for children, and importantly, it'll affect everyone in the UK. But today, the government's chosen to focus on the impact on foreign spouses. One minister saying many recipients have, quote, never set foot in Britain at all. Well, generally, there are 220,000 pensions being paid to overseas residents based on the contributions of their spouse. That's costing us just over £400 million per year, but that includes Britons and non-Britons. Ministers say for over half of those individuals, they have no record of national insurance payments being made, so that's their basis for the belief that they're foreign. But the reality is that there's no proof that these people have never set foot in the UK. And the government admits that these changes are not based on nationality anyway. There are no tests involved of what country these pensioners live in. They'll apply in the UK as much as anywhere abroad. So pension changes are hard to sell at the best of times. The changes will bring in a simple, flat, weekly pension of £144 for all. But there are also lots of losers too. This was never meant as a crackdown on foreign spouses, but without those national insurance contributions, they will, in future, lose their right to a UK pension. How many are actually in this position abroad? Well, no one seems to know.
Faisal Islam. Well, earlier I spoke to the Pensions Minister, Steve Webb. I began by asking him what exactly is the policy change the government has announced.
So what we're saying is, under the new state pension system to come in from April 2016, the pension you get will be based on what you yourself have put into the system, not anything to do with your husband or wife. And that old system has been in place since the Second World War, and we just think it's out of date, paying people pensions based on their husband or their wife's record.
But, I mean, you yourself have chosen to focus on people living abroad. You are talking about people getting a state pension who've never set foot in this country. I mean, how many people would that cover?
So of the more than 200,000 pensions that we pay outside the UK to people based on a spouse, generally a husband's record, more than half of those people have no national insurance record at all. In other words, the whole pension is to do with their spouse.
But they may well be British, though, mightn't they? The whole point of this pension is that it is based on your spouse's contributions. It doesn't matter that they haven't had any contributions.
It would be exceptionally unlikely for most of them to be British, in the sense that if you've spent time in Britain, if you've worked or brought up a family or cared or, you know, been unemployed, all of those things give you rights under the pension system. But many of these folk have got no rights at all in their own right. And we're simply saying, I think people would be astonished to know you can get a British pension for 20 or 25 years without ever contributed to the system,
but
British or foreign.
But that is the point of this particular pension, isn't it? That it is based on your spouse's contribution. So it may well be that these people are people who've retired to Spain after their husband or wife has worked for 40 years here.
But the question is, what have they themselves been doing all their life? If they've been, for example, contributing to the British system, they will get their own pension in their own right. The folk we're talking about don't have those pensions in their own right, so we don't know their nationality. Some will be British, some won't be. What we're saying is a fair and sensible...
But you have focused on nationality in a way by talking about these are people who have never stepped foot into Britain. You have put the focus on those people. Why have you done that?
What we've noticed is in Britain, the number of people getting pensions based on a spouse has been falling, but outside the UK, the numbers we're paying are actually increasing. So this is going to be more and more of an issue, and the reason we're focusing on pensions outside the UK is those are the ones that are growing.
You see, critics would say that the reason you're focusing on this very small subset of people who claim this married person's allowance, who live abroad, is because you are chasing the tail of Ukip. You are trying to win back some of the votes you lost last week.
Well, I think if we could write a pensions bill in 2 days, that might be true. But we've been working on these plans for several years, green papers, white papers, draft bills.
It's about the focus you're putting on it today, isn't it? Because fundamentally, this is about a change that will affect possibly millions of people living here in Britain. But you have chosen to focus this on a small group of people who, as you put it, have never set foot in Britain. That's a very different tone, isn't it?
And part of the reason for that is that we've spoken at some length about how the new system will be fairer for women, fairer for the self-employed, better for the low-paid. And the aspect of it that we haven't really talked about is the way that it will be about individuals, not couples. So we're illustrating another good feature of the new system with reference to the fact we're paying pensions to folk who've never put into the system, and we think that's one of the reasons why the new system will be fairer.
Isn't this rather a cheap attempt to win votes from this idea we're tackling foreigners who are getting something for nothing?
I mean, we're talking over 200,000 people and rising. We're talking
but it's not 200,000 people that you know factually have never stepped into this country, is it?
Well, as I say, over half of those have no national insurance record at all. And given that you can get a national insurance record from just working for 1 year, it means that many of these people have very little contact with the country. And we are talking over £400 million, so it's not a trivial amount of money. And at a time when money is tight, we want to focus that money on people who've put cash into the British system.
Steve Webb, thank you very much for joining us.